All right, but by and large, if we think in terms of, statistically speaking, Fido, the abstracting of Fido stops at whatever level it may be. And as far as we know, that although Fido can abstract, he does not know that he abstracts. He doesn't have the mechanisms, either neurologically or extensions of the nervous system, libraries, science, and so forth, to develop the kind of awareness that you and I have, that not only do we abstract, but we can know that we abstract. Not only are we aware, but we can become aware of our awareness. Not only are we conscious, but we can become conscious of our consciousness. And that is a tremendous advantage, and also probably the source of most neuroses. So it's a sort of a double-edged sword. We pay a price for our advanced rating and the evolutionary spiral. Now, if indeed Fido abstracts but doesn't know he abstracts, we can then label these connecting lines in a different way. We could say that the connecting lines between what is going on and what I experience, since I can know about that this not only represents what gets in, and this represents what doesn't get in, what I don't respond to, but the connecting lines can also represent consciousness of abstracting. And if you're drawing this, writing it down, I suggest you add that term along the line here, consciousness of abstracting. And there, for my friend who was talking to me about the difference between animals and humans before, there I would suggest we still have the major difference. Now, not all humans are conscious of abstracting, but apparently for neurological and cultural reasons, we have the capability of becoming conscious of abstracting. And that makes a big difference. All right, we cross the boundary then from the nonverbal to the verbal levels. And in doing this, I would like to make a pitch as a corrective against the tendency that I often see among people who are working with general semantics to despise the verbal level. We know that the verbal level can entrap us, and we sometimes seem to feel that, we have to eschew that. We have to become sophisticatedly mute. I'm so advanced that I have achieved the inability to speak. Well, if that's what we're aiming for in general semantics, I'm looking for another field. However, and we're going to do some exercises in a bit, related to achieving consciousness of abstracting, based on the notion that if you don't have a very concatenated, let's say, feel for what's going on at nonverbal levels, you may never understand your verbalizations. And that bias I'm committed to very strongly. So let's keep it balanced. As we move from here to here, we move precisely into the human level. You and I not only have experiences, my dog has experiences. Man, I come home and that husky that I have is not too discriminating. All over the place. She's very excited. Now I can infer that she loves me. But she never told me. And you know how it is? You gotta be told. Can't you see? I said, no, tell me. I want to hear it. You better tell me about it. And frequently. Otherwise, I'm going to start thinking that I'm projecting, fantasizing. I really don't know what I'm into. Let's label these different levels. We've already touched on this. Isn't that handy? First order, verbal abstracting, descriptions, naming, etc. Presumably the simplest language behavior of which we have any record. We infer, we don't know by any means, because we've never been able to find a society at this level where all they do is ascribe. Oh, we have languages in which the language is freighted very heavily in descriptive terms, but we have not been able to find a language or a group of language users who are not very heavily caught up in inferences, inventing gods, cultural biases, and so forth and so on. So we can't rerun the universe. A lot of these things are not subject to empirical test. You can't stop the world and then get off and start it running again and watch to see how it happened before. You must just be satisfied to infer these previous processes. Descriptions, naming, this is the level at which statements of fact that we talked about before are made, if at all. If at all. This is the level at which statements of fact are made, if at all. Pretty skinny hunting. If we were in the kind of course where I were going to give home assignments and we had more time, I would ask you, say, between the time you leave here today, and maybe we'll do this, and the time you come back tomorrow morning, keep a blank piece of paper in your pocket, and as you go around interacting with other people, every time you hear yourself enunciate a statement of fact, whip out your paper and make a mark on it. Let's add another aspect to this. Let's say that these 10 factual statements must not be of the painfully trivial nature. Like, there's a person on this telephone who says they want to speak to you. You might get a few of those. Okay? Or somebody might observe, oh look, the waiter is walking in an uneven way. I want to infer that that's a limp, but I detect a certain unevenness there in his gait. Now we'll eschew that kind of level, but you hear yourself making a statement where you're involved and you're concerned, and if you recognize, hey, that was a statement of fact, put a mark on your paper. You know, it's one thing for you to say as the king of Las Vegas, I make very few factual assertions, and that's a fact. Right? It's one thing for you to say that and go about your merry way imposing on other people and beating your wife or whatever you do. It's quite another thing for you to, through some kind of space-time period, to really pay attention enough to, you know, I really don't say many factual things. I don't know that I've said more than 4 or 5 factual things since I started babbling last night. And I have made a lot of statements. But if you examine them, you will realize that they are by and large inferences. Now, they're inferences that I consider very much supported by a lot of data collected by other people, who I infer to be honest. But I haven't said many factual statements. I had another delightful luncheon today. I think we made a record. I don't think anybody said one factual statement. I had a lot of laughs, though. I'm suggesting that if indeed you go through such an idiot exercise, you will feel something in your belly. And it'll make a difference to you. Try it. Try it and see what happens. I'll give some assignments later on where I'm going to ask you to date yourself and to index some of your pet biases. You may say again, what's the point? And I will then say, very briefly, shut up and do it. And that'll be the point. First order, verbal abstracting, descriptions, names. I look out here. I report to you lots of boats. Rich cats. Rich cats. I infer that the people who have those boats parked out there got some bread stashed somewhere, in many cases mainly in the boat. But yeah, they got more stuff than I got. I don't have a boat like that. I could probably only get a boat like that through dishonest means. You see where we are already? We're actually beyond that. We're about at a fifth order already. Because on the basis of my inference that only rich cats can own stuff, that we speculate, we make inferences about how they could get the money to buy such things, and then you come in with the notion that maybe they're not all that honest. Somehow they've done something. How quickly it happens. How quickly it happens. Okay, well, let's be more technical about this for the moment. We've already done the practical application, and let's say we'll call this an inference, a first order inference. I see boats out there that I would salivate to have, and I conclude that the people who own them are fairly well off. I cannot see their well-offhood. All I can see is the boats. They may be in hock up to their nostrils, as far as I know. Maybe.
Have we moved now down to the third level? I mean, let's see, we got the two first non-verbal levels.
Yeah.
We've got a descriptive and naming level.
And now we're at the first order inference.
That's
yeah.
the fourth level.
Yeah.
First order inference.
Okay. Yeah, I may make a whole series of inferences. Let's call it inference A, inference B, inference C. Well, we could do it this way. Inference N. Any number of inferences at approximately this same level. And when we talk about this level business, let's not be over rigid. Let's not think that this is some specifiable place a la Hayakawa's ladder or something like that. Maybe, Korzybski interchangeably used the terms level and order. And Marjorie Kendig, who worked with him for many, many years, was constantly after him to stop using those terms interchangeably, but to opt for the term order, which is a more mathematical term and is free of this suggestion that we're talking about a particular place. Well, I'm not going to make a big thing about that, but be aware of that. Although later neurological research is starting to suggest that, well, maybe levels isn't all that bad, because we're increasingly getting indications that the brain, the nervous system in general, but the brain in particular, constitutes a hierarchical structure. Inference of a second order, and we can assign to this the term generalization. If we have a group of generalizations that we think are related, we can make an inference at a higher order, inference sub 3, which we can call a hypothesis. If we have a group of hypotheses that we perceive as related, that constitute a set from our point of view, we can make a fourth order inference, which we call a theory. Can we make a theory of theories? Very good. What we've been doing since last night constitutes a theory of theories. Can you have more than one theory of theories? Sure. You can have a whole series of them. That's why, or one of the reasons why, Alfred broke off the last label here. Here's his thumbprint again. This jagged end indicates the model stops here, but the process doesn't. Yeah. That the process is, at least potentially, can be indefinitely extended. We can always say something about what we just said. It's like the number system. It's been compared to that. What's the highest number you can think of? Well, whatever it is, I can always say plus 1. Well, 1's good enough. 1 is good enough to show that the series has not been exhausted. And the same thing with words. What happens when you end a meeting? Any further comments? No? The meeting is over. And what starts up immediately? Further comments. Happens all the time. In a sense, none of our meetings ever ends. Never, 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 never.
Questions and answers or whatever.
It goes on and on and on. That's why we use the etc. in general semantics. All right, now this process can go on indefinitely. And this is a very good process. The king of Las Vegas and I couldn't operate at all if it weren't for this process, could we? What are you all doing here? You may now ask. You know, seems to be the fact that you are present is an expression of this. Many of you have read general semantics. I know we have some well-known teachers of general semantics here. Edith Vall is here. She makes films about general semantics. What's she doing here? We won't press that right now. But I infer that she is aware of the broken off last label, that the last word has not been said, and that maybe coming here she may hear something or have something triggered in her that maybe hasn't happened before. The chances are fair, because no two brains ever perceive the same thing in the same way, and therefore no two brains can ever say the same thing in the same way, and there's this ongoing potential for greater awareness and understanding. Let me ask you something before we even get to the latter. Maybe somebody has a notion about this. Hayakawa, in Language and Thought and Action, or Language and Action originally, took the structural differential and turned it upside down. Anything wrong with that? Up and down really don't mean anything in this diagram, do they? No, and not the Krzyzewski. Okay. So no problem with turning it upside down. Well, it wasn't just the fact that he turned it upside down. First of all, of course, one of the problems was and here we can get into a little psycholinguistics. Is there not a sort of an intuitive feel to there being appropriateness to turning this upside down? And you have the lower orders there and the higher, that's where they belong. The lower orders ought to be on the bottom and the higher orders on the top. It has a good feel to it. And so far, really, there's no problem. We could hang this thing sideways. Why not?
The model was built to operate with gravity.
The model is not it. It costs what? $6? It costs $488 just for me to fly here and back, if I do that. we don't know about that return trip yet. So come on, we add a little $6 to the cost of the seminar. Come on, this is pretty good paper, but it's only paper. Sure, we could hang it this way. Why not? Get it out of your system. Up and down, in and out. It's got nothing to do with this. Okay? So, I'm comfortable with turning it upside down. So far, no problem. This way, I can spiral out of it. You can do all kinds of things with this, except hang it up again, maybe. We'll work on that later. What's the problem with Hayakawa's ladder?
Well, it seems to me that when he starts an explanation starting at the top, then he has difficulty with the arrow going down the bottom.
Would he have to have difficulty with the arrow?
Not if he left the thought
Or not if he had included it? Why was the arrow left out? Hayakawa's ladder is like climbing Jacob's ladder. You get up there and you're lost in the clouds. Where do you go from the so-called higher order abstractions? You're lost. And I suspect that a lot of English teachers' negative responses to general semantics may be related to that. I don't know. Who could trace that? It's just a feeling I have about the cultural history of general semantics. The arrows, first of all, the arrow retarded to parabola indicates that by the time we get to this very higher order abstracting, cut that out, that what we're talking about here is precisely this. When I say simple sentence, the universe is a process, that's the most abstract thing I could say, isn't it? In the description, we start with saying, well, we infer the universe to be a process. But that simple statement is the result of hundreds of years and thousands upon thousands of nervous systems interacting with each other to discover all kinds of things that we cannot see with the naked eye-brain system. So that's a very high order abstraction to say the universe constitutes some kind of process. So that's one thing that the arrow indicates, that our highest order abstractions are precisely about the event level. Strictly inferred, not directly observed. The second thing that this indicates is that whatever our higher order abstractions may be, they impact on our subsequent abstracting processes. And here we get an insight into things like prejudice and being blocked, semantic blockages, and so forth and so on. If I am what is called a paranoid schizophrenic, very good at verbalizing. I've dealt with a lot of them. Some of my best friends are paranoid schizophrenics. One thing I'll say for them is they like puns. The paranoid schizophrenic interacts with the process U, and he's got whatever he's got going for him. And let's say he's walking down the street. He already knows at a higher order that people are no damn good. X's. Let's say not people in general. Maybe he's got to think about X's. And he has formulated in his head, all X's are dangerous to me. So he's walking down the street one day, interacting with good old PU, and he internalizes something. He's got a picture in his brain, and it's just enough for him to say, oh, that's an X, at which point a kind of short-circuiting occurs in which the higher order abstracting gets imposed at this level, and he can no longer interact at this level. He cannot see anything except what his theory dictates. N-Ray, Dr. Blondell. Niggers are no goddamn good. There's a nigger. What else do I have to know? And you can fill in your blanks. We'll give you a chance to deal with your own prejudice later on. Anybody claims to be prejudice-free? Well, if they convince us of it, we'll give them 2 copies of Selections from Science and Sanity. Are you with me there, Russ? He's got all kinds of unexpected expansions developing this afternoon. Yes? I'm sorry. Well, continuing observation to, see, he's jumping from the labeling level, where he simply identifies this as a member of a class, and then all of his notions about the class interpose. He doesn't continue making any observations or moving in what Krzyzewski called the natural order, but which I like to call the preferable order. Because, see, I think the natural order of abstracting is hardly ever met with. Therefore, it must not be all that natural.
Then he came to a conclusion. Is there a level at which you might say the conclusion exists from?
The conclusion exists? No. The conclusion always remains a conclusion. The notion that the universe constitutes a process is strictly a higher order inference. And that is all. The best statement we can make, overall summary statement about the characteristics of reality, 1979. And this, to me, is very central to internalizing general semantics. You make very vigorous statements tentatively. The best data we have. Anybody argues against this, I very quickly suspect they haven't read any science, they haven't done any homework, they've been away smoking something, who knows what they're doing. But I don't say that incontrovertibly, absolutely, they must be wrong. I just want them to give me a little data.
So when I reach a conclusion in the same way as this man did, that's really an inference. The word conclusion means inference.
They're equivalent terms. Inference, conclusion, interpretation, hunch, bias, preference, all of these are inferential. And the inference is not a fact. Inferences are not facts. That is descriptive statements. Whatever I say something is not this, and whatever I feel, experience is not this. And we're right at the heart of the map is not the territory and the non-identity of levels of abstracting. In the time remaining in this segment, I would like to ask you to engage in some exercises designed to promote consciousness of abstracting. We've talked about consciousness of abstracting as a verbal formulation, simply the awareness that we go through this procedure as we fill our heads that we have described up to this point. We claim, and when I say we, I mean practitioners of general semantics, that insofar as we are free at all, it is only insofar as we achieve consciousness of abstracting. That at least opens the window where we might be able to enter consciously into this process and make some changes in premises. We'll talk about that tomorrow. Logical fate, as Cassius Kaiser called it. But in order to do that, we have to do something different from just talking about it. You all are you not evidence of that? I am too. Most of you have some knowledge of general semantics. You've read books, and yet you're finding, apparently, from what some of you have been telling me, that through this interaction, you're realizing some things that you didn't realize before. And part of it, perhaps, is a function of things like tearing the structural differential. The map is not the territory. The structural differential is not it. General semantics is a system of formulations which says no to its own conclusions, in the sense that all the conclusions reached are tentative, firmly held, but at a given date. General semantics is a system which says no to its own conclusions, and it's open in the sense that all conclusions, although firmly held, are considered tentative at a given date. And we commit ourselves, although we may not match up to it, but at least we commit ourselves at a given time to being willing to revise the formulations as new data seems to make that revision compelling. It's my bias that that has not yet happened. That indeed the ongoing progress of the natural sciences seems to reinforce many of the formulations of general semantics with which I am aware, or of which I'm aware, with which I'm familiar. But we don't conclude therefrom that that condition is going to be always present. Krzyzewski predicted that within 50 years there would be a necessity for a non-Krzyzewskian system. I think he was delightfully mistaken. He underestimated his own synthetic genius. But that doesn't mean that the time will not come. So we keep looking, we keep aware, meanwhile recognizing that this is only a model, This is a way to kind of organize the stuff in a way that seems to me more clarifying than any other system that I happen to know about. And that's the source of my commitment to it, I say. Who knows what all kinds of reasons there might be, why I'm excited about this discipline. Well, at the heart of it, people often used to say, well, Alfred, what is the purpose of general semantics? And very often the answer was to achieve consciousness of abstracting. A central goal. Without consciousness of abstracting, we're simply knee-jerk philosophers, doing the same thing that the human race has done eons and eons, generations after generation. So we need to do some work at consciousness of abstracting, and it has to get beyond the point where we're just talking formulations, as important as that talking seems to be. And this is what I'd like to do in the final hour today. And now, please throw the cassette over for the start of side B. Now to start with, I'm going to ask you to do a relatively simple sort of thing. I want you to have some paper available to you, preferably a fairly large surface. So if you're writing with some skimpy pieces of paper, borrow some from a neighbor. Wait a minute. Now, unfortunately, I didn't bring any of my pads with me, or I'd share them, but let's time bind if you need some large paper, I would say. Gentleman in the front row here. Would you give him a larger sheet of paper, please? He may not even be aware that he needs one, but give him one. Okay. Okay, so pass it around because you're going to be writing with your eyes closed. And in order to do that, you ought to have a pretty generous surface to interact with. And what I'd like you to do is to simply listen with your eyes closed. And as you're listening and hearing, try to be as quiet inside your own head as you can be, and just jot down the sources of the various noises that you hear. If you hear a thump of some sort, you think somebody closed the door, just put door closing. If you hear a whir and you think there's an air conditioner on or a motor has begun out in the marina, just put marina motor or boat or something like that. Identify it any way you like. Okay? So you'll be using familiar terms from the culture to label these nonverbal heard experiences. Let's try that for a moment or two with your eyes closed. And don't worry about handwriting and how neat it looks. Okay, what did you hear? Anybody?
A lot of things. I heard paper shuffling, whispering, seat squeaking, dogs barking.
Dogs barking.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Water running. Somebody dropped something.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what it was, but I heard he dropped. Breathing, conversation
It's my hotel key, but don't take it too seriously.
Conversation in the room off to the right. I can hear it coming through the wall. Table creaking. Mike burping.
Mike burping?
That's what
Mike who?
that-
Oh, this one.
And then I heard it blowing.
Okay, anybody else? Anybody hear anything that she didn't mention?
I heard,
Mm-hmm.
My own breathing.
Your own breathing. Right.
I heard some kind of a chugging way off in the distance, like an old railroad train or something. So I can still hear it chugging.
Hammering.
Cracking of the beams. Somebody oriented to process. Yes.
Some person got up and walked down the aisle. Made lots of noise.
Lots of noise. Okay.
Hands jumped up.
There's a lot of stuff going on. We've made the point that in a very neutral way, what we abstract and transduce and integrate and project is a function of the structure of ourselves as nervous systems. But we know through the building up of attitudes, through neuro-linguistic feedback. I didn't use that term before. Would you add it to your sketch? This arrow can also be labeled neuro-linguistic feedback. And this, of course, neuro-linguistic feedback.
Building up of attitudes.
Yes, building up of attitudes is a function of, or an expression of, depends on neuro-linguistic feedback. Again, this Alfred was a strange person. He only anticipated cybernetics by about 40 years, I would say. Well, maybe not that, but 30. Published works in the field anyway. In fact, the reason he got very excited about the term feedback in 1948 or thereabouts is because he had already incorporated it within his thinking without using that term explicitly. So the arrow is very important, and this, when I mention Hayakawa's ladder, it's not, of course, a personal thing about Hayakawa. It's a very important methodological issue to have left out this returning arrow, which predisposes us to perceive new things in terms of what we have already perceived and internalized at a prior date. To leave that out is to almost make general semantics simple-minded. So this neuro-linguistic feedback indicated by the arrow returning is a tremendously important formulation within general semantics. All right, so you've now seen, demonstrating to yourselves, that you didn't all abstract the same thing. Some people heard some things and some people heard others. Presumably, that difference in hearing is partly a function of the differences in you as nervous systems, but partly a function of your past history and what you're interested in, what you think is important, what your attitudes are. Now let's try to get even a little more awareness of this difference between the silent level represented by this, not the objective level. Krzyzewski uses that term, it's unfortunate. The level at which we perceive what we call objects. There's nothing objective about this in the sense that we can escape being subjective, so-called. We don't use terms objective, subjective, as though they were opposed. We experience whatever we experience. We construct a sense of objects in ourselves as nervous systems based on the way we abstract and transduce and integrate and project and so forth. Now let's see if we can, but see, we were sort of, something's going on, bird calls, what have you. You had certain neurological experiences and you said, bird call. Nothing wrong with that, is there? Man, if I hear coming along the track, and I happen to be deciding whether or not I'm going to go across the track, I think it's very important for me to say choo-choo train and decide whether or not I should go across the track at that moment. But we're going to try to eliminate this area now. We're going to try to just be here, but we're going to do something sort of maybe proto-labeling. All right, this time I want you to listen and just try to listen in an allowing sort of receptive way. And I'd like you to jot down some kind of representation of the noise that you hear, but I don't want you to identify it with a culturally available term. If you hear a I don't want you to say B or 707 or whatever. No, I don't want you to say humming. That's a cultural term too, isn't it? I want you to simply write down something using letters that could represent that noise. You'll actually be sort of forced into a mode of musical notation, but you don't have to know anything about music to do it. If you go, you've seen it in comic strips and so forth. But I don't want you to use any terms like plunk, bang, or door closing, anything of that sort. Just try to invent some way to represent the sound experience. You may get some insight into what it must have been like to be the first proto-literate caveman who said, oh, man, if I can only put this down with what? Close your eyes, listen, record what you can. All right, let's go on to the third phase of the exercise. Now that you're composers, now I want you to see if you can shut up. Most difficult part of the exercise. And what I want you to do is just listen without recording anything, hearing, but not commenting on what you're hearing to yourself. See if you can reach a point where you're not speaking. Now you may become very quickly aware of a sort of a tape recording running in your head, which is yourself talking to yourself. Does it make a difference? Sure it does. We only experience language as electrochemical events in our own nervous systems. And it's not surprising, therefore, that our language, through the effects of neurolinguistic feedback, can lead to electrocolloidal disturbances, such as ulcers, the higher incidence of dental caries. We know for a long time, 40, 50 years now, that people who are consistently under great stress have a far higher acid secretion level in their mouths and experience a far higher incidence of dental caries. Neurolinguistic feedback. What we say to ourselves is not something neutral, but is based on electrochemical firings in our own nervous system. Any kind of discipline in which you try to cut off the verbalizing. Now, I'm not a big, into a whole lot of Eastern disciplines and all that sort of thing. I'm familiar with them. To me, any discipline or any kind of practice whereby we can turn off the tape, at least momentarily, and escape for just at least a few moments the impact of neurolinguistic feedback, must be to the good. It's at least relaxing, if nothing else, and it may be a way, if you practice it from time to time, it may be a way of short-circuiting, of cutting across some of the inevitability of the neurolinguistic patterns that we all have built into our own nervous systems. I've included in this bibliography quite a bit of material which is not strictly general semantic material, but which supplies updated scientific background. And it seems to me that anyone who's currently studying or working in general semantics
should read the current scientific material to, of course, update many of the things discussed in Science and Sanity. And one of the striking things, as I pointed out with relation to the neurophysiology yesterday, or neurobiology as it's now called, is the continuing cogency of Krzyzewski's statements in Science and Sanity. And to my knowledge, many of those discussions about atomic processes and so forth are still in tune with current scientific information. If you haven't read Bois, I strongly recommend that you do so, particularly the Explorations in Awareness and the Art of Awareness. From my point of view, the Art of Awareness remains Bois' major work. The subsequent books, particularly Breeds of Men, and the later book on epistemics, in which Bois felt that he was going beyond the Krzyzewskian formulations. I have some difficulty with that, particularly with the 5 stages of the epistemological profile, where for me, stage 5 seems very much like a regression to stage 1. But I leave you to read about that and work that out for yourself. Frank Chisholm's book, Introductory Lectures on General Semantics, which has never been available as a trade book, it's only available from the Institute of General Semantics, is an excellent introduction. And if you have not read that, even if you consider yourself an old hand in general semantics, I very strongly recommend that you read through that book. Frank Chisholm, F.P. Chisholm, Introductory Lectures on General Semantics. Do you have the list, the bibliography, whoever asked that?
Yes, I do.
Okay, fine. Hayakawa's book, I think, is still quite useful, but with the caveats that we've already mentioned. From my point of view, the ladder of abstraction is methodologically quite misleading, but there are many discussions in there about day-to-day communicating and the use of English that I think are very useful. Of course, Wendell Johnson, People in Quandary still, I think, remains a very excellent, not just an introduction to general semantics, but a discussion of applications to the fields of psychology and personal adjustment and so forth. Of course, Krzyzewski's works, all the major ones are listed here, not many of the papers. Many people seem not to have read Manhood of Humanity, and if you haven't, I'd recommend that you do that, particularly for its discussion of the time-binding function. And it's an interesting work to suggest some of Krzyzewski's socio-political views, which I think are quite at the heart of his system. And of course, Science and Sanity is the major work. And in reading that, if you haven't done so, I strongly recommend that you not skip Book 3, which originally was as Krzyzewski was first putting the book together, as I understand, was intended as Book 1. But wise people convinced Krzyzewski that if he put that in the front of the book, nobody would get to the middle of the book. So what has happened, I think, for many readers is that they read the first 2 parts and skip the last third of the book, which is better than skipping the book as a whole. But very, very good exercise to sweat your way through that. I came into general semantics from a background in English and education, and for me that was particularly useful to make myself work through some of that mathematico-logical sort of stuff and some of the discussions of Einstein, things of that sort. Irving Lee, Language, Habits, and Human Affairs. I believe, is that Where is that available from, Russ? Is that available from the International Society? Do you have it?
Well, it should be by the first of the year. It's not now. It's out of.
Yeah, it's out of print, I understand. Okay. An excellent introduction to general semantics, and particularly noteworthy in this book are the very numerous examples, applications, incidents culled from the newspaper and so forth, which Dr. Lee was very brilliant at relating to general semantics formulations. Postman and Weingartner's book, Linguistics, A Revolution in Teaching, I think is an excellent survey, and I recommend that also. The second page, unfortunately, is not terribly readable. In fact, as I'm looking at it now, it seems to me almost unreadable. But we're not going to take the time to go over what those words say. You'll see there's some stuff there by Robert Pula. I don't recommend any of that. It's mostly pretty opaque stuff, and things that were written for conferences and so forth. But if you do get the General Semantics Bulletin, a copy of the current issue, actually last year's issue, and this year's will be coming out in about a month. Excellent journal, says the editor, and you will occasionally find stuff in there by me if you're interested in seeing what I have to say when it's printed. Marjorie Swanson's book, Scientific Epistemological Backgrounds of General Semantics, is available from the Institute, and I think you also have that on your list, don't you, Russ? Yeah.
We don't currently.
You don't currently? Okay, well that is available from the Institute of General Semantics. And that's an excellent updating of some scientific data related to general semantics and discussed from a general semantics point of view. And again, it's one of those kind of homework background kinds of readings that you might do. Finally, Harry Weinberg on this page, Levels of Knowing and Existence, is, for my money, I would not hesitate to say the best of what we might call the second generation books in general semantics. It's really more than just a popularization. It's a presentation about the first half of the book of Weinberg's discussion of basic general semantics formulations, but it's also a discussion of the relationship of general semantics to various other approaches and disciplines such as Zen Buddhism and cybernetics and so forth. So I recommend that very highly. For some of the perception material that we've been discussing, there's one book that is not a general semantics book that I'd like to recommend to you. On the third page, R.L. Gregory, Eye and Brain, The Psychology of Seeing and the Intelligent Eye. The first one, Eye and Brain, is concerned with simply presenting a lot of basic material. Gregory is probably the world's leading examiner of this kind of material, and this book appears in the World University Library series, which is an excellent series written by people who are experts, world-recognized experts in their fields, who are asked to contribute a volume to this series for the intelligent, so-called intelligent layman. It's an excellent book, profusely illustrated with, you get a pair of glasses with it to look at stuff and all kinds of good things. The Intelligent Eye is a more philosophical book in which Gregory reaches various conclusions and makes recommendations based on what we know about perception and brain functioning. A.R. Luria, I mentioned Luria yesterday, Higher Cortical Functions in Man, a very, very important book in which the functioning of the brain is discussed in terms of hierarchy. And as I mentioned, Luria is having a great impact now in American studies on the brain. Okay, finally, a very interesting writer with whom I have some problems, Oliver Reiser, someone who's rather neglected. In the 40s, he was very prominent in participating in general semantics conferences and wrote several books. He was one of the first serious major philosophical writers in America who discuss Krzyzewski seriously and sympathetically. And his book, The Integration of Human Knowledge, there's also an earlier one called The Promise of Scientific Humanism, yes, which is also excellent. I have a problem with Reiser in that in both of his books, somewhere about 2/3 of the way through, he takes off and goes into mystical realms into which I'm not willing to follow. But perhaps that's my problem. But excellent discussions, excellent survey discussions of a lot of the background material that Krzyzewski grew out of in producing his work. All right, fine. Are there any questions about yesterday? Yes.
Well, no.
Well, today.
The paperback is just the selections from the pre-volume.
That's right.
Correct?
Yeah.
The second item is that how does Fritz Perls and Frank Goebel relate to general semantics?
Well, the approach called Gestalt therapy, which Perls is the main formulator of, is very congruent with general semantics formulations. The emphasis on the role that language plays or can play in sort of producing pathology, stresses and so forth, the emphasis on nonverbal exercises, breathing and listening, things of that sort, which is very congruent with the kind of thing that we do in our seminars that the Institute gives in the summer. In the upcoming General Semantics Bulletin, there's a paper by a fellow named Basescu on general semantics and Gestalt therapy, and you might want to see that. Basescu is a Gestalt therapist who works in New York, who also has a background in general semantics, and his paper discusses Gestalt therapy using general semantics terms. Very interesting. Is that enough to satisfy your immediate
What about Frank Goebel?
question?
On page 3.
Yeah, well, let me remind myself of that. Oh, I see. Goebel is that's the third force fellow, is it? Yeah, okay. Well, again, I think that his discussion, Maslow's formulations, I think are very, they vibrate sympathetically with Krzyzewski's point of view. Maslow himself was interested in general semantics, gave a Krzyzewski memorial lecture, and is one of those people working who is not in general semantics, or was not, but whose work fits in very well, I think, with the general semantics point of view. In fact, quite a few of the non-general semantics books listed here are of that type, where we're not, by putting it on this list, suggesting that they're working, in general semantics, but their views are quite reverberate sympathetically, is the phrase I've been using. There was a paper, I guess 10 years ago or so, that appeared in Scientific American by Luria, and I forget what the title was, but I was very struck. In fact, I remember writing all over it. The correlation between his discussion and the notion of the structural differential, and the implication in his work, where he, as I said yesterday, seems to be identifying different brain structures as responsible for different orders of abstracting. And there's a very strong congruence between what he's talking about and Krzyzewski's descriptions in Science and Sanity. So it's well worth looking at from that point of view, but primarily to read the writing of one of the major figures in the world today in working with brains. He had the advantage, he worked in Moscow for 30 years, and as a result of World War II, he had people to work with who had bullets in their brains. And the Russians apparently, instead of just putting these people off somewhere and just feeding them or whatever, decided, with the person's consent, they became subjects of research. So that Luria has been able to infer very much about brain functions in certain areas based on the loss of capacity of these people with bullets in their brains. So he's had the opportunity to do research of a sort that probably nobody else in the world has been able to do, because he had these wounded people to work with. So it's very interesting work. I realize I'm holding this up here like it's the book, and it's Sunday morning. Why not? I put this up because you asked about the paperback, and that is indeed just selections which were culled by Guthrie Jansen. This, of course, is the El Bigo, and the one that it seems to me that if you're serious about general semantics, you sooner or later got to stop putting it off and come to terms with this monster. All right, any other questions about this? Yes.
What is the name after Washburn, I believe, in Smith? Looks like Watt something.
Oh, Watzlawick and others. Yeah, another excellent book. I'm glad you mentioned that. For me, that's the best non-general semantics discussion of human communications that I know of, called The Pragmatics of Human Communication.
How is that name spelled?
Watzlawick.